a lot of councillors say they feel unsafe because they fear being attacked or killed. This was revealed by the Gauteng Premier David Makhura while visiting ANC Councillor Tshepo Motaung's home yesterday. Motaung, a ward councillor in Mabopane, was shot and killed on Friday evening. Now I'm joined by Ekurhuleni ANC chairperson Mzwandile Masina to talk about this particular scourge. Mr. Masina, thank you very much for your time. Political killings have become over the years synonymous with the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Is Gauteng the next frontier of political killings in your view?
Well, I think that we are witnessing lots of violence, especially during our internal meetings of the ANC, which is strongly condemned because ANC is a peaceful organization, so we have to resolve our ideological issues through superior logic, not through violence. In our area, for instance, we've not witnessed any killings in Ekurhuleni, but we've seen a lot of violence, especially during the BGMs leading to the nomination of councillors. And this, in my view, is something that must be stopped by the African National Congress.
And I quite like what you're saying, Mr. Masina, that this has to be stopped by the African National Congress. I just want to give you a sense of what the chairperson of the ANC in Gauteng, that's David Makhura, who's also the premier here, had to say yesterday during that visit alongside the Minister of the Police. I want us to just have a quick listen to that. We'll pick up after that.
I've received significant concerns that it's not only the councillors who feel unsafe, but also people in communities feel very unsafe. They are threatened by these criminal gangs, and that's what they really are. They are criminal gangs that are organized. They go and disrupt meetings. They target those they disagree with. They get sent to carry out these killings.
Mr. Masina, I'm hoping you've heard the Premier and Chairperson of the ANC in Gauteng. He talks about criminal gangs. My question to you is, those criminal gangs, are they within the ANC, or you think that these are people who are engaged in acts of criminality on their own without being prompted or without these killings being orchestrated from within the ANC?
Look, there is no criminal who can just move from his home into the ANC meeting. So it means that the Premier and the Chairperson is correct that these are orchestrated sometimes from within, because who will know the date of the meeting and who will know the agenda items on the meeting of the ANC. So it means these are people who are intimately closely linked to the African National Congress in one way or the other. So others could be rented out, others are within ourselves in the African National Congress. Hence, I was making the emphasis that it will be important for the ANC to stop this act of intimidation and violence, especially during the branch general meetings.
Should the ANC leadership then be much more emphatic and clearer in their communication around this, Mr. Masina, that these are not just pure acts of criminality that stem from nowhere. These are ANC orchestrated murders?
Well, I think obviously as it happened in KwaZulu-Natal, before we are conclusive on this matter, it will be important that a thorough investigation is done so that we are conclusive on this matter. And the reason why I am saying that the ANC will have to make sure that this comes to a complete stop is because if there are no ANC meetings, we don't see the kind of violence that we see in the meetings. So, these things are, in my view, linked. So it is important, therefore, that we must undertake the same process that KwaZulu-Natal undertook to ensure that a proper investigation is done, so that we are able to isolate the criminal elements vis-a-vis those who are within the broader movement who are also causing chaos during our meetings.
Yeah. All right. So I want to then transition from this discussion and bring in the community element. You heard the Premier who says these gangs are not only terrorizing ANC councillors, but it's also members of the community. I want to ask you the question about whether the ANC, either unconsciously or perhaps in a way that they would have looked at this particular matter when deciding that the community must be involved in choosing whoever is going to be a councillor of a particular area. I want to ask you the question about whether the ANC has put the lives of communities at risk. But before you answer that, I'd like you to have a listen to Jessie Duarte, the Acting Secretary General of the ANC, and what she had to say they had analyzed about the violent element in the ANC during this period. Let's just have a listen to Jessie Duarte. All right, that bite from Jessie Duarte seems to have been lost somehow. But she was very clear, Mr. Masina, that the solution they think, or should I say the ANC thinks, to this is that the community must be the one who chooses who is going to be councillor of a particular area. In your view, should that be reviewed, this stance? Because clearly it has put members of the community at risk as a result of ANC thuggery. In fact, we found the bite. Just have a listen quickly.
That violence of that nature stems from a condition that we've analyzed, where people want to be councillors so that they can have access to the resources in the council, and they become vicious and dangerous. And the only way to actually overcome this is to have our communities decide who must be their representative. This is work that we all have to do. Let me say frankly, it is not just the ANC that must deal with the pandemic and deep-rooted sense of entitlement that some people have in our country.
So a very clear question to you, Mr. Masina, on the back of these comments. Do you think the ANC has made a mistake by suggesting that the communities be the ones who choose members when the ANC clearly it's problematic for it to choose members because of the fights from within?
Look, in many of the community meetings, we've not witnessed a lot of violence as opposed to the ANC meetings itself, where the process starts. And you'll recall that in the past, the ANC used to nominate candidates and still take them to the community to introduce them. So this time around, the ANC has thought it fit that beyond just introducing these members, we must also allow communities, in an event they are not happy or satisfied with the ANC internal processes, to nominate their own candidate who then gets to be embraced. And I think that the ANC did not make a mistake, and the communities must take responsibilities, because we can't say we're a leader of society, but we keep on being more comfortable with our internal processes, ignoring the majority of our voters. I think that this was a step in the right direction. It has to be perfected, and I'm certain that the ANC will be able to perfect this so that we can get our communities choosing their own ward councillors that they are comfortable with, and this will ensure a decisive victory for the African National Congress. All
right. Very briefly then, I'm out of time. If this was a right decision for the ANC to take, which results in members of the community being vulnerable to ANC factional battles, how do you protect communities then from the violence?
Well, we can only call upon our members and the community at large to behave, because this is a behavioral issue. It's not a matter of life and death, this issue of electing councillors. If we're not elected, I'm sure there will be other future deployments. So it must never happen that our movement is used as a source of violence, and we must condemn in the strongest possible terms any attempt by anyone, either the member of the ANC or the member of the community, who involves himself or herself in the acts of violence in the process.
Mzwandile Masina is chairperson of the ANC in Ekurhuleni. Thank you very much for your time.